The bullet wasn't meant for her. Elizabeth's white blouse bloomed crimson as she crumpled into the arms of Seoul's most feared man, and in that heartbeat, Choi Moo-jin learned that some debts can only be repaid with blood, devotion, and the complete destruction of everything he'd once been. Welcome to the channel. I'm so glad you've joined us for another powerful story. Whether this is your first time here or you're a long-time listener, I'm thrilled to have you in our community. Before we get started, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you never miss an episode. It's the best way to support the stories you love. Also, I love seeing how far our stories travel. Leave a comment below and let me know which part of the world you're watching from today. Now, let's jump straight into the story. 3 months earlier, Elizabeth Morrison had no idea that a misdelivered antique vase would unravel her entire existence. She stood in the doorway of the upscale coffee shop in Koreatown, Los Angeles, balancing the ornate porcelain piece wrapped in brown paper. Her natural hair pulled back in an elegant bun that showcased the graceful line of her neck. The morning sun caught the warm undertones of her dark skin as she scanned the interior, looking for table 7 where the online order form had specified delivery. "You're in the wrong place," a voice said behind her. Smooth as aged whiskey and twice as dangerous. Elizabeth turned. The man who'd spoken wore a perfectly tailored black suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent, his sharp features and dark eyes holding an intensity that made her breath catch. Intricate tattoos crept up from his collar, disappearing beneath the expensive fabric. Traditional Korean patterns mixed with something darker, more menacing. "I'm looking for a Mr. Choi," she said, lifting the package slightly. "Antique delivery." Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe amusement. "I'm Choi Moo-jin." "Oh." She consulted her phone, frowning. The address said. The address was wrong. "My associate is an idiot." He gestured to a corner booth, the movement precise and controlled. "But since you're here..." Elizabeth hesitated. Every instinct screamed that this man was dangerous, that the way other patrons suddenly found their coffee fascinating, refusing to meet his eyes, meant something significant. But she'd built her small estate sale and antique delivery business on professionalism, and she needed the 5-star review. She followed him to the booth. "Coffee?" he asked, and before she could answer, he'd signaled the barista with a subtle gesture that had the young woman scrambling to comply. "I really should just deliver this and sit." It wasn't a request, but somehow it wasn't quite a command either. More like an invitation wrapped in inevitability. Elizabeth sat, carefully placing the vase on the table between them. It's 18th century Joseon dynasty, as advertised. The authentication papers are in the envelope. Moo-jin didn't look at the vase. He looked at her, and Elizabeth felt the weight of that gaze like a physical thing. She'd dealt with difficult clients before, entitled collectors, suspicious buyers, but this was different. This man studied her like she was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve, an anomaly in his carefully ordered world. "You're not afraid," he observed. "Should I be?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Most people are." The barista arrived with 2 cups of coffee so dark they were nearly black. Elizabeth took a sip and nearly choked. It was absurdly strong, thick enough to strip paint. Moo-jin's smile widened fractionally. "Too much." "It's like drinking liquid midnight," Elizabeth managed, but she took another sip. "Terrible. I love it." And there it was, the moment that would later seem so insignificant yet so completely pivotal. Moo-jin laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his face from dangerous to merely devastating. Around them, the coffee shop seemed to exhale, tension releasing by degrees. "You're strange," he said. "I get that a lot." Elizabeth unwrapped the vase, revealing the delicate blue and white porcelain beneath. "My grandmother always said I had a gift for seeing past surfaces. She said most people only look at the outside of things and miss what's actually there." Wise woman. She was. Elizabeth traced the vase's rim gently. "She taught me that everyone has something good in them, even when they work really hard to hide it." Moo-jin's expression shuddered slightly, that guard sliding back into place. "Your grandmother sounds naive. She sounds kind. There's a difference." Elizabeth met his eyes directly. "Kindness isn't weakness, Mr. Choi. It's just A different kind of strength. He studied her for a long moment, and Elizabeth wondered if she'd crossed some invisible line, if that carefully controlled danger would finally strike. Instead, he reached across the table and picked up the vase with surprising gentleness, examining the delicate patterns. "My mother collected these," he said quietly, "before she died." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. It was a long time ago." He set the vase down, his fingers lingering on the smooth porcelain. "She would have liked you. She believed in all that kindness nonsense too." "It's not nonsense. In my world it is." "What world is that?" Moo-jin's smile turned sharp again, dangerous. "One you should stay far away from, Elizabeth Morrison." She blinked. "How did you?" "Your business card is in the envelope with the authentication papers." He pulled out a black credit card, laying it on the table. "For the vase, and for the coffee. Keep the change." Elizabeth glanced at the card, recognizing the exclusive banking logo. Whatever Moo-jin did for a living, it paid extraordinarily well. The rumors she'd heard whispered in Koreatown, the way people's voices dropped when certain names were mentioned, suddenly crystallized into uncomfortable understanding. "You're that Choi Moo-jin," she said softly. "There's only one." He stood, buttoning his suit jacket with practiced ease. "Thank you for the delivery, Miss Morrison. I suggest you forget this address and this conversation." But Elizabeth was already standing too, her hand reaching out to touch his wrist before she could think better of it. Moo-jin froze, and she felt the coiled tension in him, the way his entire body prepared for violence at her unexpected touch. "I don't forget people easily," she said, withdrawing her hand. "Especially ones who quote their mothers and drink terrible coffee. That's a dangerous habit." "So I've been told." She smiled, genuine warmth lighting her features. "But my grandmother also taught me that sometimes the most dangerous-looking things just need someone to see past the thorns to the flower underneath." "I'm not a flower, Miss Morrison." "No," Elizabeth agreed, gathering her things. "But you're not just thorns either, no matter how hard you pretend to be." She left then, walking out into the Los Angeles sunshine, feeling his eyes on her back the entire way. She didn't know that Moo-jin stood at the window long after she'd disappeared, the vase forgotten on the table, his carefully constructed world already beginning to crack at its foundations. She didn't know that her words, naive, innocent, absurd, had struck something in him that he'd thought long dead. And she certainly didn't know that in 3 months' time, she'd take a bullet meant for his heart, and in doing so would resurrect it completely. The second time Elizabeth saw Choi Moo-jin was entirely by accident, though later she would wonder if anything involving him could truly be accidental. She'd been having lunch at a small Korean restaurant in Los Angeles, the kind of place tucked between a laundromat and a phone repair shop, where the ajumma who ran it knew everyone's order by heart. Elizabeth came here every Thursday, had been coming for 2 years since she'd stumbled in during a rainstorm and fallen in love with the kimchi jjigae that reminded her of her grandmother's cooking. Different flavors, same love baked into every bite. She was halfway through her meal, reading an article on antique authentication on her phone, when the door chimed. The restaurant, previously filled with the comfortable buzz of conversation, went absolutely silent. Elizabeth looked up. Moo-jin stood in the doorway with 2 other men flanking him, both broad-shouldered and cold-eyed. He wore another expensive suit, this one charcoal gray, and those tattoos that crept up his neck seemed darker in the dim restaurant lighting. His gaze swept the room with the precision of a predator assessing territory, and then stopped on her. For a moment, something flickered across his face. Surprise, perhaps concern. Then the mask slid back into place. "Miss Morrison," he said, moving toward her table with that controlled grace she remembered. His companions stayed by the door, human barricades. "This is unexpected." "I could say the same." Elizabeth gestured to the empty seat across from her. "Are you here for the kimchi jjigae? It's incredible." The ajumma behind the counter made a small sound. Shock or fear, Elizabeth couldn't tell. The other diners had suddenly become very interested in their meals. Heads down, chopsticks moving mechanically. Moo-jin sat, and the restaurant seemed to inhale collectively. "You come here often?" he asked. "Every Thursday for 2 years." "You?" "I own the building." Of course you do. Elizabeth took another bite of her stew, refusing to let the tension affect her appetite. The landlord's special must be excellent then. Another ghost of that smile. You're not going to ask what I really do, are you? I figure if you wanted me to know, you'd tell me. She met his eyes directly. Besides, I'm more interested in why someone who drinks paint stripper coffee and collects 18th century porcelain would own a building in this neighborhood. My mother grew up 3 blocks from here, Moo-jin said quietly. Before she married my father. Before everything changed. The Ajumma approached their table with trembling hands, setting down a bowl of the same stew Elizabeth was eating and a small plate of banchan. She bowed deeply to Moo-jin, murmuring something in Korean that Elizabeth didn't catch. Gamsahamnida, Moo-jin replied, his voice softer than Elizabeth had heard it. The Ajumma scurried away, but not before shooting Elizabeth a look that might have been pity or warning. She's terrified of you, Elizabeth observed. Yes. Does that bother you? Moo-jin picked up his spoon, considering the question with the same intensity he'd examined the vase. It used to. Now it's just necessary. Necessary for what? Survival. Control. He took a bite, and Elizabeth watched something subtle shift in his expression. Memory, maybe nostalgia. My mother used to make this. Not as good as Mrs. Kim's, but close. Mrs. Kim is the Ajumma? Yes. She's been here for 30 years. My mother knew her back before. He trailed off, taking another bite. Elizabeth waited, recognizing the weight of unspoken history. Her grandmother had taught her that sometimes silence was its own kind of kindness, a space for people to fill if they chose. Before my father ruined everything he touched, Moo-jin finished finally. Before he turned our family name into something people whisper in fear. Before he made sure that the only inheritance I'd receive was blood and violence. You didn't have to accept that inheritance. His laugh was bitter, sharp-edged. You think I had a choice? Everyone has choices, Mr. Choi. Call me Moo-jin. He set down his spoon, fixing her with that intense stare. And you're wrong. Some of us are born into cages, Miss Morrison. The bars might be gilded, but they're still bars. Elizabeth, she corrected. And cages only work if you believe in them. You're very idealistic for someone who deals in objects from the past. Don't those antiques teach you that history repeats, that people don't really change? Elizabeth smiled, gesturing around the restaurant with her spoon. These antiques teach me that beautiful things survive, even through terrible times. That someone centuries ago created something lovely, and it endured. That's not about repetition, Moo-jin. That's about resilience. He studied her like she was a text in a language he'd forgotten, trying to remember the translation. Around them, the restaurant had resumed its normal rhythm, though Elizabeth noticed people still avoided looking directly at their table. Why aren't you afraid of me? He asked finally. Should I be? Are you planning to hurt me? No. The answer came quickly, almost reflexively, and something in his tone suggested the response surprised him as much as it did her. Then there's your answer. Elizabeth finished her stew, wiping her mouth with a napkin. My grandmother used to say that fear is just love that hasn't learned to trust yet. You can see the same thing 2 ways, as a threat or as potential. And which do you see when you look at me? Elizabeth considered him carefully. The expensive suit that couldn't quite hide the violence coiled in his frame, the tattoos that marked him as belonging to a world she could barely imagine, the eyes that held too much darkness and, buried beneath it, a flicker of something else. Something searching. I see someone who buys vases that remind him of his mother, she said softly. Someone who owns a building to protect a restaurant that serves his mother's favorite food. Someone who works very hard to make sure people only see the thorns. Moo-jin's jaw tightened, and for a moment Elizabeth thought she'd gone too far, pushed past some boundary that would finally trigger the danger everyone else seemed to sense so acutely. Instead, he pulled out his phone and slid it across the table. Put your number in. Why? Because I'm going to a gallery opening next week. Contemporary art mixed with traditional Korean pieces. You know, antiques. Come with me. Is that a request or a command? Does it matter? Elizabeth picked up the phone, her finger hovering over the screen. It does to me. I don't respond well to commands. Then it's a request. He leaned back, and there was something almost vulnerable in the gesture, a careful lowering of defenses. Please. She entered her number and slid the phone back. What should I wear? Something that makes you feel like yourself. He stood, pulling out enough cash to cover both meals and likely the entire restaurant's earnings for the day, leaving it on the table. I'll pick you up at 7. You don't know where I live. That dangerous smile returned. Elizabeth, I've known where you live since 5 minutes after you left the coffee shop. He walked out, his companions falling into step behind him, and the restaurant exhaled collectively. Mrs. Kim rushed over to Elizabeth's table, speaking rapidly in Korean before switching to English. You be careful, yes? That man, he is very dangerous. Very powerful. I know, Elizabeth said gently. But you go with him anyway? Elizabeth thought about the way Moo-jin had said his mother's name, the softness that had crept into his voice when he spoke about this neighborhood, the careful way he'd eaten the stew like it was a prayer to someone lost. Yes, she said. I think I will. Mrs. Kim shook her head, muttering something in Korean that sounded like a blessing or a warning or both. She pressed a small wrapped package into Elizabeth's hands. Extra kimchi, still warm. For luck, Mrs. Kim said. You will need it, I think. Elizabeth walked home through the afternoon sunshine, the package warm in her hands, Moo-jin's words echoing in her mind. I've known where you live since 5 minutes after you left the coffee shop. She should have been frightened. Should have blocked his number, changed her Thursday routine, recognized the warning signs that everyone else seemed to see so clearly. Instead, she found herself smiling, already wondering what she would wear to a gallery opening with one of Los Angeles's most dangerous men, already imagining what other pieces of his carefully hidden self he might reveal when he thought no one was looking closely enough to see. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. Some souls are like locked rooms, baby girl. They just need someone patient enough to find the right key. Elizabeth had always been patient, and she'd always been good at finding keys. In this world, loyalty is everything. Show yours by subscribing to the channel and smashing that like button. Join the family and stay tuned for the next phase of Moo-jin's revenge. The gallery opening was in downtown Los Angeles, in one of those converted warehouse spaces where exposed brick met minimalist lighting and champagne flutes. Elizabeth wore a deep emerald dress that hugged her curves and made her skin glow like burnished gold, her natural hair styled in elegant twists that cascaded over one shoulder. She'd debated for an hour, standing in front of her closet, wondering what one wore to an art gallery with a man whose world operated in shadows. In the end, she'd chosen to feel like herself, exactly as he'd suggested. Moo-jin arrived precisely at 7 in a black town car with tinted windows. He emerged wearing a 3-piece suit in midnight blue, the vest highlighting his lean frame, and when his eyes found her standing on her apartment steps, something shifted in his expression. Appreciation, maybe surprise. You look beautiful, he said simply, offering his hand to help her into the car. You clean up pretty well yourself. Elizabeth settled into the leather seat, catching the subtle scent of his cologne, something expensive and understated, like cedar and smoke. The driver pulled away from the curb, and Elizabeth noticed another car falling into place behind them. When she glanced at Moo-jin questioningly, he simply said, Security. Do you always travel with an entourage? Always. He poured her a glass of champagne from the bar built into the car's console. In my position, paranoia isn't a character flaw, it's a survival skill. That sounds exhausting. It is. He clinked his glass against hers, and in the dim interior lighting, his tattoos seemed to shift and move like living things. Tell me about your grandmother. You mention her often. Elizabeth sipped the champagne. It was excellent, probably cost more than her weekly grocery budget. Her name was Ruth. She raised me after my parents died in a car accident when I was 8. She was a teacher, taught history at an inner-city high school for 40 years. She sounds formidable. She was. Elizabeth smiled, remembering. She used to say that history wasn't about memorizing dates, It was about understanding that every person, no matter how far in the past, was just as real and complicated as we are. She taught me to look for the humanity in everything. Even in people like me. Especially in people like you. Elizabeth met his gaze directly. The ones who work hardest to hide it usually need someone to see it the most. Moo-jin looked away, watching the city lights blur past the window. Your grandmother would have hated what I do. Probably. But she also would have tried to feed you and ask about your mother and make sure you knew that whatever you'd done, you were still human underneath it all. Elizabeth paused. She believed in redemption, even when it seemed impossible. Redemption, Moo-jin repeated, tasting the word like something foreign. That's a luxury for people who haven't gone as far as I have. Or it's a necessity for people who've gone exactly that far. Before he could respond, the car pulled up to the gallery. A red carpet stretched from curb to entrance. Photographers clustered along its edges despite the event's supposedly private nature. The moment Moo-jin's door opened, camera flashes erupted. He exited smoothly, buttoning his jacket, and then offered his hand to Elizabeth. She took it, stepping out into a barrage of light and shouted questions in Korean and English. Moo-jin's hand settled at the small of her back, proprietary and protective, guiding her through the chaos. Mr. Choi, who's your date? Is this business or pleasure? Are the Kim family rumors true? Moo-jin ignored them all, his face a mask of practiced indifference, but Elizabeth felt the tension in his touch, the way his body positioned itself slightly between her and the cameras. Inside the gallery, the noise cut off abruptly as heavy doors closed behind them. Sorry about that, he said, his hand lingering a moment longer before dropping away. I should have warned you. It's fine. Though I'm now wondering what Kim family rumors they're talking about. His expression darkened. Nothing you need to worry about. The gallery was stunning. High ceilings, white walls, and carefully lit pieces that ranged from traditional Korean pottery to contemporary installations. Wealthy patrons clustered in small groups, their conversations hushed and exclusive. When Moo-jin entered, heads turned, and Elizabeth watched the same pattern from the restaurant repeat itself. A collective awareness, a subtle shift in body language, the careful maintenance of respectful distance. They're all afraid of you, she murmured. They should be. Half of them owe me money. The other half owe me favors, which is worse. A woman approached, mid-50s, elegant in a black silk pantsuit, her smile professionally warm but not quite reaching her eyes. Moo-jin, how wonderful you could make it. And you've brought a guest. Director Park. This is Elizabeth Morrison. Elizabeth, Director Park runs this gallery. Charmed, Director Park said, though her gaze swept over Elizabeth with cool assessment. Are you a collector, Miss Morrison? I deal in antiques and estate sales, Elizabeth replied evenly. Mostly 18th and 19th century pieces. How quaint. The dismissal was polite but clear. Director Park turned her attention back to Moo-jin. There's a Joseon dynasty piece in the back room I think you'll appreciate. Very rare. Very expensive. I'll take a look. Moo-jin's hand found Elizabeth's back again. We'll walk through together. They moved through the gallery, Moo-jin pointing out pieces with surprising knowledge, discussing artistic techniques and historical context with an expertise that startled her. He wasn't just wealthy. He was educated, cultured in ways that contradicted everything his reputation suggested. You know a lot about art, Elizabeth observed as they studied a contemporary piece. Steel and glass twisted into something both beautiful and violent. My mother loved art. Used to drag me to museums every weekend when I was young. His voice softened with memory. She said that beauty was proof that humans were more than just animals, that we could create things that outlived us. She was right. She was naive. But there was no heat in his words, just a bone-deep weariness. Beauty doesn't protect you. It doesn't save you when everything falls apart. Elizabeth touched his arm gently. No, but it reminds you what's worth saving when you're ready to rebuild. Before Moo-jin could respond, a man appeared beside them. Late 30s, expensive suit, a smile that was all sharp edges. Two others flanked him, their postures aggressive despite the civilized setting. Choi Moo-jin, the man said in accented English. "I didn't expect to see you here. Thought you'd be busy dealing with the Port of Long Beach situation." Moo-jin's entire demeanor changed. The man who'd been discussing art and memories of his mother vanished, replaced by something cold and lethal. "Kim Jae-sung, you're either very brave or very stupid to approach me in public." "Just making conversation." Kim's eyes slid to Elizabeth, and something ugly flickered across his face. "Pretty date. Does she know what you really are?" "She knows enough." Moo-jin's voice could have frozen fire. "And this conversation is over." "Is it?" Kim stepped closer, and Elizabeth felt Moo-jin's hand tighten on her back, his body shifting to place himself more directly between them. "Because word is you're getting soft. Word is you're distracted. Word is maybe it's time for new leadership." The gallery had gone silent. Everyone pretended to study art while actually watching the confrontation with barely concealed fascination or fear. "Words are cheap," Moo-jin said softly, and somehow the quietness made it more terrifying. "Actions have consequences. You should remember that before you do something irreversible." "Is that a threat?" "It's a fact." Moo-jin's smile was blade-thin. "Now, if you'll excuse us, we were enjoying the art." He guided Elizabeth away, but she felt the weight of Kim's stare boring into her back and heard his parting shot clearly. "Watch yourself, Choi. Everyone has weaknesses. Even you." Outside the gallery, in a quiet corridor leading to the back exhibition rooms, Elizabeth finally spoke. "Who was that?" "A rival. An ambitious one." Moo-jin's jaw was tight, anger simmering beneath his controlled surface. "I should take you home. This was a mistake. Because he threatened you. Because he looked at you like you were a target." Moo-jin turned to face her fully, and there was something almost vulnerable in his expression, beneath the fury. "I shouldn't have brought you into this world, Elizabeth. You were right when you said I'm surrounded by thorns. They cut everyone who gets close." Elizabeth stepped closer, closing the distance between them. "What if I'm not afraid of getting cut?" "Then you're foolish." "Maybe." She reached up, her fingers ghosting near the tattoos on his neck but not quite touching. "Or maybe your thorns don't scare me as much as the thought of you facing all this alone." Moo-jin caught her wrist, not roughly but firmly, his thumb finding her pulse point. "You don't know what you're saying. What I do, the things I've done. I don't need to know everything to see who you are underneath it all." Elizabeth's voice was steady, certain. "I see someone who honors his mother's memory. Someone who protects a restaurant because it connects him to better times. Someone who knows enough about art to talk about it with genuine passion. That's not a monster, Moo-jin. That's a man who's been hurt and learned to hurt back." His grip on her wrist loosened, became almost tender. "What if the hurt is all there is? What if there's nothing left to save? Then I'm wasting my time." Elizabeth smiled. "But I don't think I am." For a long moment, they stood in that quiet corridor, the sounds of the gallery muted by distance and heavy doors, and something passed between them, unspoken but undeniable. A recognition. A connection. A dangerous, impossible thing taking root. "I should still take you home," Moo-jin said finally, but he didn't move. "You should." Elizabeth agreed. Neither of them moved. Then Moo-jin's phone buzzed, shattering the moment. He pulled it out, read the message, and his expression went completely cold. "We need to leave. Now." "What's wrong?" Kim wasn't here to talk. He was here to establish timeline. To make sure witnesses saw us together. Moo-jin was already moving, pulling Elizabeth with him toward a side exit. "He's making a move tonight, and he just painted a target on both of us." The drive back was tense and fast, the town car weaving through Los Angeles traffic with practiced precision. Moo-jin was on his phone, speaking rapid Korean to someone on the other end, his free hand still holding Elizabeth's as if anchoring himself to something solid. When he finally hung up, his jaw was set in a hard line. "I'm taking you to a safe house," he said. "My people will guard you until this is resolved." "What exactly is this?" Elizabeth asked, proud that her voice remained steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Kim Jae-sung runs a rival organization. We've had a truce for 3 years, but he's been testing boundaries, moving into territories that were agreed to be neutral. Moo-jin's thumb traced absent circles on her palm, a gesture that seemed unconscious. Tonight's confrontation wasn't spontaneous. He wanted witnesses to see us together, to establish that you're important to me. Am I? The question slipped out before Elizabeth could stop it. Moo-jin turned to look at her fully, and in the passing streetlights, his face was a study in contrasts. Hard and soft, dangerous and vulnerable. Yes, he said simply. Which is why you're in danger. The car pulled up to a nondescript building in Silver Lake, modern and secure with cameras visible at every corner. Moo-jin's security detail, now expanded to 4 men, created a protective perimeter as he led Elizabeth inside and up to a 3rd-floor apartment. It was surprisingly comfortable. Lived in, even. Not the sterile safehouse she'd imagined, but a space with personality. Books lined one wall, mostly Korean literature with some English translations. A kitchenette held evidence of actual cooking. The furniture was quality but not ostentatious. You come here often? Elizabeth asked, running her fingers along the bookshelf. It's mine. One of the few places I can just be. Moo-jin moved to the window, checking sightlines with the practiced eye of someone who'd survived by being careful. No one knows about it except my most trusted people. Then why bring me here instead of an actual safe house? He turned from the window, and something in his expression made her breath catch. Because I trust you. And because if Kim makes his move tonight, I'd rather you be somewhere that matters to me, somewhere I can defend personally, than in some impersonal location. Elizabeth set down her purse, kicked off her heels, and padded across the hardwood floor to where he stood. Tell me about Kim. What's this really about? Moo-jin sighed, running a hand through his hair, disrupting its careful styling. It made him look younger, more human. My father built an empire on violence and fear. When he died 5 years ago, I inherited it. All the territories, all the alliances, all the enemies. I've been trying to restructure. Make things less bloody, more business. Let me guess. People like Kim see that as weakness. Exactly. He moved to pour them both drinks from a cabinet. Whiskey, neat. The old way was constant war, constant death. I've been trying to build something more sustainable, but men like Kim think that means I've gone soft, that I've forgotten how to be ruthless. Elizabeth accepted the glass, the amber liquid catching the light. Have you forgotten how to be ruthless? His laugh was bitter. No. I've just gotten tired of it. Tired of waking up wondering who I'll have to kill today. Tired of attending funerals for soldiers who died over street corners and shipping routes. He downed his whiskey in one swallow. My mother would be ashamed of what I became. What my father made me become. Or she'd be proud that you're trying to be better. You didn't know her. She would have. His phone buzzed again. He read the message and swore in Korean. Kim hit 3 of my warehouses simultaneously. It started. What happens now? Moo-jin set down his glass with controlled precision. Now I remind everyone why they were afraid of my father, and why they should be more afraid of me. He moved toward the door, then stopped, turning back to Elizabeth. There's food in the kitchen. The door is reinforced steel. 4 of my best men are positioned around the building. Don't leave for any reason. Where are you going? To end this. He paused, something warring behind his eyes. Elizabeth, if something happens to me. Don't. She crossed to him quickly, her hand finding his chest, feeling his heartbeat beneath the expensive fabric. Don't talk like that. I need you to understand something. His hand covered hers, pressing it more firmly against his heart. Meeting you these past few weeks, it's been. I'd forgotten what it felt like to have someone look at me and see anything other than a weapon. You make me want to be the man my mother hoped I'd become instead of the one my father demanded. Then come back, Elizabeth said fiercely. Come back and be that man. Moo-jin leaned down, his forehead resting against hers, and for a moment they simply breathed the same air. You're the most dangerous thing that's ever happened to me, he murmured. Because you make me believe I could be something different." Then he was gone, the door closing behind him with a solid thunk, and Elizabeth was alone in his private sanctuary with her heart pounding and his words echoing in her mind. She tried to distract herself, examined his books, finding worn paperbacks of Korean poetry next to pristine hardcovers on military strategy, made tea in his kitchen, finding the cabinets organized with the precision of someone who actually cooked, studied the single photograph on his desk, a woman with kind eyes and Moo-jin's smile, holding a small boy who couldn't have been more than 5. His mother. Before everything fell apart. Hours crawled by. Elizabeth tried to read, tried to sleep on the comfortable couch, tried not to imagine what ending this meant in Moo-jin's world. Every instinct screamed that she should be terrified, should be calling the police, should be running as far from this dangerous man and his dangerous life as possible. Instead, she found herself praying, something she hadn't done since her grandmother's funeral, that he would come back safe. At 3 a.m., her phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello. Elizabeth Morrison." The voice was unfamiliar, male, speaking English with a Korean accent. "You should leave now. Walk out the front door. There's a car waiting." "Who is this?" "Someone doing you a favor. Choi Moo-jin is finished. His war is lost. If you stay there, you'll die when we come for him." Elizabeth's blood ran cold. "I'm not leaving." "Then you're a fool." The line went dead. She immediately tried calling Moo-jin, but it went straight to voicemail. She tried again. And again. Nothing. One of the security guards knocked on the door. She recognized him from the gallery. "Miss Morrison? We need to move you. Now." "What's happening?" "Kim's forces are bigger than we anticipated. They're consolidating territories. We have orders to evacuate you to a secondary location." Something in his tone was wrong. Elizabeth had spent years reading people, assessing the truth behind polite lies in estate sales and negotiations. This man was lying. "I'll pack a bag," she said, moving toward the bedroom. "We don't have time." 2 minutes. She closed the bedroom door, her mind racing. If Moo-jin's own security was compromised, if Kim had turned his people, then nowhere was safe. She needed to think, to plan, to... Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. * Don't trust anyone. Kim bought 3 of Moo-jin's guards. Stay inside. Lock the bedroom door. Real help is coming. Park *. Park. Director Park from the gallery? How did she? The apartment's main door crashed open. Shouting in Korean, the sounds of a struggle, then gunfire, sharp, deafening cracks that made Elizabeth's ears ring. She locked the bedroom door with shaking hands, shoving a dresser in front of it for good measure. More gunfire. Screaming. Then silence. Miss Morrison. A different voice, also Korean accented. "We're not here to hurt you. We're taking you to Kim Jae-sung. He wants to talk. Come out peacefully and no one else dies." Elizabeth's mind raced through options. The bedroom window led to a fire escape, but she'd heard them mention posting men in the alley. Her phone was her only weapon, and that seemed laughably inadequate. "I said come out." The door handle rattled violently. "What do you want with me?" Elizabeth called back. "Buying time. Your leverage. Insurance. Choi is too dangerous to attack directly, but take what he values and he'll make mistakes." A pause. "We know he values you." The door shuddered under a heavy impact. The lock wouldn't hold much longer. Elizabeth looked around desperately and her eyes landed on the window. Not the fire escape, the ledge. Narrow, terrifying, but it wrapped around the building. If she could make it to the next apartment, if someone would let her in, if she could just survive long enough for help to arrive. The door splintered. Elizabeth climbed out onto the ledge in her stockinged feet, the emerald dress utterly impractical for urban climbing, and immediately regretted every choice that had led to this moment. The night air was cold, the ledge was perhaps 8 inches wide, and below her, 3 stories of absolutely nothing. She pressed herself against the brick, inching along, trying not to look down, trying not to think about how absurd this was. She was an antique dealer from Silver Lake, not some action hero. Behind her, She heard them burst into the bedroom, heard their shouts of confusion and anger when they realized she'd gone out the window. There. A head appeared, then shoulders, someone climbing out after her. Elizabeth moved faster, her fingers scraping against brick, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. The next window was close, so close if she could just... Her foot slipped. For one terrible, infinite second, she teetered on the edge of nothing, her arms windmilling, gravity pulling her toward the inevitable. Then her hand caught the window frame of the next apartment and she hauled herself toward it with strength born of pure terror. The window was locked, but desperation made her bold. She kicked it hard once, twice, until the glass shattered. An alarm shrieked. Elizabeth didn't care. She climbed through, falling into someone's dark living room, cutting her arm on remaining glass, not stopping even as blood dripped down her skin. She ran for the apartment door, threw it open, and sprinted down the hallway toward the stairs. Behind her, her pursuer was climbing through the broken window. Elizabeth flew down the stairs, her injured arm leaving a trail of crimson drops, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She hit the ground floor and burst out into the street just as 3 black SUVs screeched to a halt in front of the building. Men poured out, armed and moving with military precision, and Elizabeth stumbled backward, preparing to run again, until she saw who emerged from the center vehicle. Moo-jin. His suit was torn, blood spattering his white shirt. She couldn't tell if it was his or someone else's. His face was a mask of barely controlled fury until his eyes found her, and then something cracked in his expression. "Elizabeth," he breathed, crossing to her in 3 long strides. His hands framed her face, his eyes scanning her frantically. "You're bleeding. What happened? Where are they?" "Inside. 3 floors up. They broke in, killed your guards, were trying to take me to Kim." The words tumbled out as adrenaline gave way to shaking relief. "I went out the window." "You what?" "The bedroom window. Onto the ledge. I didn't know what else to do." Moo-jin pulled her against his chest, one hand cradling the back of her head, his heartbeat thundering against her ear. He said something in Korean to his men, sharp, commanding, and they immediately moved into the building. "You went out onto a 3rd-story ledge," he repeated, pulling back to look at her like she was something both miraculous and terrifying. "I didn't have a lot of options." "You could have died." "So could you." Elizabeth touched the blood on his shirt. "Are you hurt?" "This isn't mine." He examined her cut arm, his touch gentle despite the violence still radiating from every line of his body. "This needs stitches. Come on." He guided her to one of the SUVs, and only then did Elizabeth notice Director Park standing beside it, looking entirely too comfortable with the weapons and chaos. "You texted me," Elizabeth said. Director Park smiled slightly. "I've been on Moo-jin's payroll for 15 years. The gallery is a front for laundering money and facilitating meetings. When I realized Kim had compromised the security team, I had to warn you." "Everyone in my life is apparently living a double life," Elizabeth said faintly. Moo-jin wrapped his jacket around her shoulders. It was warm from his body and smelled like him. "Welcome to my world," he said quietly. "Still think there's something worth saving?" Elizabeth looked at him, at the blood and fury, at the careful way he held her injured arm, at the fear that had cracked through his mask when he'd seen her bleeding in the street. "Yes," she said. "Still do." Something fierce and vulnerable flashed across his face. Then his men were emerging from the building, dragging 2 prisoners, and Moo-jin's expression went cold again as he turned to face them. "Where is Kim Jae-sung?" His voice was ice and iron. Whatever happened next, Elizabeth knew the real war was just beginning. The heat is rising. If you're enjoying this cinematic journey, subscribe and like now so you never miss a beat of Elizabeth and Moo-jin's story. The safe house Moo-jin took her to next was different, a sprawling estate in the Hollywood Hills, hidden behind gates and sophisticated security systems. Elizabeth sat in an enormous bathroom while a Dr. Moo-jin kept on retainer stitched her arm with practiced efficiency. "You're lucky," the doctor said in accented English, tying off the final stitch. A few inches to the left and you would have hit an artery. I don't feel particularly lucky, Elizabeth muttered, watching Moo-jin pace outside the open door like a caged predator. The doctor packed up his supplies and left with a respectful bow to Moo-jin. The moment they were alone, Moo-jin entered the bathroom and sank to his knees in front of where she sat on the closed toilet lid. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice raw. "This is my fault. I brought you into this world, made you a target." "Stop." Elizabeth cupped his face with her uninjured hand, forcing him to look at her. "I made my own choices. You warned me. Multiple times. I chose to stay anyway. Why?" The question came out almost desperate. "Why would you risk this for someone like me?" "Because someone like you," she said softly, "is exactly who needs someone to believe in them." Her thumb traced the line of his cheekbone, feeling the tension coiled beneath his skin. "My grandmother used to say that the people who push others away the hardest are the ones who need connection the most." Moo-jin's hand covered hers, pressing it more firmly against his face. "Your grandmother sounds like she was either very wise or very dangerous." "Both." Elizabeth smiled. "She taught inner-city kids for 40 years. You don't survive that without being both." He turned his head, pressing a kiss to her palm, a gesture so unexpectedly tender that it made her breath catch. "I need to finish this with Kim. Tonight. Before he makes another move against you." "What does finish this mean?" Moo-jin stood, pulling her up with him, leading her out of the bathroom and into a bedroom that was clearly his. Masculine, minimalist, but with small touches of personality. Another photo of his mother on the nightstand. A worn paperback of Korean poetry on the bed. Windows that overlooked the glittering sprawl of Los Angeles below. "It means I'm going to offer Kim a choice," Moo-jin said, moving to the window. "Retreat and live or continue and die. He attacked you, Elizabeth. He crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. Will he retreat?" "No." Moo-jin's reflection in the window was cold, lethal. "He's gone too far. His only options now are to win or to be eliminated. There's no middle ground in this world." Elizabeth moved to stand beside him, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere down there, people were living normal lives, going to movies, having dinner, falling asleep on their couches. The violence and danger that consumed Moo-jin's world seemed impossibly distant from those ordinary moments. "How did you end up here?" she asked quietly. "In this life." Moo-jin was silent for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of old grief. "My father was what you'd call a traditional boss. Brutal, unforgiving, ruled through fear. My mother was the opposite. Kind, artistic, saw beauty in everything. She tried to shield me from what he was training me to become. But she couldn't. No." His jaw tightened. "When I was 17, a rival organization kidnapped her. They thought my father would negotiate, would trade territory or money for her life. They didn't understand that my father saw everything as weakness, including love." Elizabeth's hand found his, threading their fingers together. "He refused to negotiate. Said it would make him look weak. So they killed her and sent her body back piece by piece." Moo-jin's voice remained steady, but his hand gripped hers with bruising force. "My father didn't mourn. He just got angry. Launched a war that killed hundreds. And when it was over, when he'd eliminated every person connected to her death, he looked at me and said, 'This is why you never let anyone matter. This is why you never give them leverage.' That's monstrous. That was my father." Moo-jin finally turned from the window to face her. "I learned from him. Became what he wanted. Cold, efficient, feared. Took over when he died and continued his work because it was all I knew how to be. But that's not who you are now. Isn't it?" His free hand gestured to the window to the city below. "I still run the same organization. Still make the same decisions. Still have blood on my hands. But you're trying to change it. You said so yourself. Less violence, more business. That's not nothing, Moo-jin. It's not enough. Not for someone like you. Not for—" He stopped, shaking his head. "You should go back to your normal life, Elizabeth. Back to your antiques and your Thursday lunches and your grandmother's philosophy about finding good in people. Find someone who doesn't come with a body count. No. The simple refusal seemed to startle him. What? I said no. Elizabeth stepped closer, closing the distance between them. I'm not running. I'm not abandoning you just because this got hard or scary. That's not who I am. You almost died tonight. Almost isn't the same as did. She reached up, her fingers tracing the tattoos on his neck. These are beautiful, you know. The patterns. What do they mean? Protection. Strength. Legacy. His voice had gone rough. Traditional symbols that are supposed to keep evil away. Are they working? Clearly not, since you're standing here. But there was no heat in his words, only a desperate kind of tenderness. You're going to get hurt, Elizabeth. Worse than tonight. Kim won't stop now that he knows you matter to me. Then we end it. Together. She met his eyes directly. You keep trying to push me away to protect me, but maybe I'm stronger than you think. Maybe what you need isn't someone who runs at the first sign of danger, but someone who stays and fights with you. Moo-jin's hands cupped her face, his thumbs tracing her cheekbones. I don't know how to do this. How to care about someone without getting them killed. My father was right about one thing. In this world, everyone you love becomes a weapon others can use against you. Then we make sure they can't. Elizabeth's voice was steady, certain. You said you're finishing this with Kim tonight. Let me help. Absolutely not. Why? Because I'm weak. I went out on a third-story ledge tonight, Moo-jin. I broke a window with my bare foot. I'm tougher than I look. Despite everything, he laughed. A real laugh that softened the hard lines of his face. You're insane. You know that. I prefer optimistically resilient. She smiled. My grandmother's philosophy, remember? There's good in everyone. Even you. Even me in your world. We just have to believe it's worth fighting for. Moo-jin pulled her closer, his forehead resting against hers. If I lose you, you won't. But if I do, then you'll have had me for however long we get. Isn't that better than never taking the risk at all? Elizabeth's hand pressed against his chest, feeling his heart racing beneath her palm. Life is risk, Moo-jin. Love is risk. The question is whether we're brave enough to take it anyway. For a long moment, they stood like that, breathing the same air, balanced on the edge of something that could either save them both or destroy them completely. Then Moo-jin's phone buzzed. He pulled it out, read the message, and his expression went cold and focused. Kim's location. One of the prisoners talked. Where is he? A warehouse in the port of Long Beach. Heavily guarded. He looked at her, conflict warring across his features. I need to go. Now. Before he relocates. Then let's go. Elizabeth. I'm not asking for permission. Her voice was firm, channeling every ounce of her grandmother's steel-backed kindness. Either I go with you where you can protect me, or I follow in an Uber and potentially get caught by Kim's people. Your choice. Moo-jin stared at her for a long beat, then swore in Korean. You're going to be the death of me. Or the saving of you. Elizabeth managed a smile despite the fear curling in her stomach. Either way, we're doing this together. He pulled her into a fierce embrace, his face buried in her hair. If anything happens to you, it won't. You won't let it. She pulled back, meeting his eyes. I trust you, Moo-jin. Completely. Something shifted in his expression. Wonder mixed with fear mixed with a fierce protectiveness that made her heart stutter. Then stay close to me. Do exactly what I say. And if I tell you to run, you run. Promise me. I promise. It was a lie, and they both knew it. But sometimes love required lies that sounded like promises, faith that looked like foolishness, and courage that dressed itself in a torn emerald dress and followed a dangerous man into a warehouse at the port of Long Beach. Moo-jin made 3 phone calls in rapid Korean, his voice sharp and commanding. Then he opened a hidden panel in the bedroom wall, revealing an arsenal that made Elizabeth's eyes widen. Guns, knives, body armor, equipment she couldn't even name. He pulled out a Kevlar vest, holding it up to her. "Put this on." "That's not exactly my style." "It's bulletproof. That is exactly your style from now on." He helped her into it, adjusting the straps with gentle efficiency despite the weapons strapped to his own body. Then he handed her a small handgun. "Do you know how to use this?" "Absolutely not." "Then don't touch it unless someone is literally about to kill you, and even then, aim for center mass and keep pulling the trigger until they stop moving." That's terrifying advice. It's realistic advice. He cupped her face one more time, his eyes burning into hers. "Last chance to change your mind. Say the word and I'll have you taken somewhere safe, somewhere Kim will never find you." Elizabeth thought about her grandmother, about the inner-city kid she'd taught who'd faced violence and poverty and hopelessness, about how Ruth Morrison had never run from a challenge, never abandoned someone who needed her, never stopped believing that people could be better than their worst moments. "I'm not changing my mind," Elizabeth said. "Let's go finish this." Moo-jin kissed her then, fierce and desperate and tender all at once, a kiss that tasted like promises and fear and something deeper that neither of them had named yet. When they pulled apart, his eyes were blazing with that deadly killer aura she'd first glimpsed in the coffee shop, but now she understood it differently. It wasn't just violence. It was protection. It was devotion. It was a man who'd spent his whole life being told that caring was weakness, finally finding something worth being weak for. "Stay behind me," he said. "Always. Always." Elizabeth agreed. They walked out of the bedroom together, into a house mobilizing for war, toward a warehouse where violence waited, and Elizabeth found herself thinking about her grandmother's favorite quote, something from Maya Angelou. "Love recognizes no barriers. It jumps hurdles, leaps fences, penetrates walls to arrive at its destination full of hope." She just hoped that love would be bulletproof enough for what came next. The port of Long Beach at 3 in the morning was a landscape of shadows and steel. Massive shipping containers stacked like building blocks against the dark sky. Moo-jin's convoy of 3 SUVs moved through the industrial maze with headlights off, guided by GPS and intimate knowledge of the terrain. Elizabeth sat in the back of the lead vehicle, squeezed between Moo-jin and a stone-faced guard named Han who'd been introduced as Moo-jin's second-in-command. The bulletproof vest felt heavy and foreign against her chest, a constant reminder that this was real, that the violence she'd only glimpsed was about to become unavoidable. "Kim has approximately 30 men inside the warehouse," Han was saying in crisp English, studying a tablet that showed thermal imaging of the building. "Plus another 10 in surrounding positions. We have 23. Numbers don't matter if we're smarter." Moo-jin's voice was cold, focused, entirely different from the man who'd kissed her in his bedroom. This was the boss, the leader, the weapon his father had forged. "What about the Port Authority?" "Paid off for the next 2 hours. After that, we're on our own." 2 hours is plenty. Moo-jin glanced at Elizabeth, and for just a moment, the mask slipped, revealing concern beneath. "You're staying in the vehicle with 2 guards. Doors locked. Engine running. If things go wrong, they drive you straight to LAX and put you on the first flight to anywhere." "Moo-jin. This isn't negotiable." His hand found hers, squeezed once. "I need to know you're safe to do what needs to be done. Please." The "please" decided it. Elizabeth nodded, even as everything in her screamed to stay by his side. "Okay." The vehicle stopped 100 yards from the warehouse, tucking into the shadows of a container stack. Moo-jin's men emerged silently, moving with military precision, checking weapons and communications equipment. They wore dark tactical gear, their faces grim and focused. Moo-jin stepped out, then turned back to crouch beside Elizabeth's open door. "If I don't come back." "Don't." She grabbed his vest, pulling him closer. "Don't say goodbye like that. You're coming back." "If I don't," he continued firmly, "there's a lawyer named Park Min-jun in Beverly Hills. Everything I have goes to setting up a foundation in my mother's name, art education for underprivileged kids. Tell him you have my authorization to oversee it." Moo-jin. "And tell him that Choi Moo-jin's last act was trying to be the man his mother wanted him to be." His hand cupped her face. Because of you. Because you saw something worth saving. Elizabeth's eyes burned with tears she refused to shed. Then come back and save it yourself. Don't make me do this alone. He kissed her forehead, lingering there for a heartbeat. I'll try. Then he was gone, moving toward the warehouse with Han and his men, disappearing into the shadows like a ghost. The two guards assigned to Elizabeth, a young man named Kim Ji-ho and an older woman named Lee Sun-mi, settled into the front seats. The engine idled quietly, ready for instant escape. He'll be okay, Sun-mi said, catching Elizabeth's eyes in the rearview mirror. I've worked for Moo-jin for 8 years. He always comes back. There's a first time for everything, Elizabeth murmured, watching the warehouse with growing dread. Minutes crawled by. 5, 10, 15. Elizabeth's hands were clenched so tight her nails cut crescents into her palms. The warehouse remained dark and silent, revealing nothing. Then, gunfire erupted. The sound was nothing like movies. Sharper, more chaotic, overlapping cracks that shattered the night. Elizabeth jerked forward against her seatbelt, every muscle screaming to run toward the noise, toward Moo-jin. Stay down. Ji-ho barked, hand on his weapon. More gunfire. Shouting in Korean. Something exploded, not huge, but enough to send a fireball briefly illuminating the warehouse's broken windows. Elizabeth's phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered with shaking hands. Elizabeth Morrison. Kim Jae-sung's voice, smooth and poisonous. You're in the white SUV approximately 100 yards northeast of my position. I can see you on my cameras. Her blood turned to ice. What do you want? I want you to understand something. Choi Moo-jin walked into a trap. Right now, he's pinned down in the western section with maybe 6 men left alive. My people have surrounded them. It's just a matter of time. You're lying. Am I? Another explosion closer this time. That was a flash grenade. Just to soften them up. In 5 minutes, we're going to overrun their position and execute everyone. Unless. Unless what? Unless you come inside. Walk through the front entrance. Unarmed. Alone. I take you hostage, Moo-jin surrenders, and we all walk away from this alive. Sun-mi was shaking her head violently, mouthing no in the mirror. Ji-ho had his phone out, trying to reach someone. He won't surrender, Elizabeth said. You know that. He will for you. Kim's voice held absolute certainty. I saw how he looked at you at the gallery. I saw the rage when my men told him they'd nearly caught you at his apartment. That man has never cared about anything in his life except power. But you're different. You're his weakness. I'm his strength, Elizabeth corrected, surprising herself with the conviction in her voice. Kim laughed. Semantics. Either way, you're leverage. So here's the deal. You have 3 minutes to walk through that front entrance, or I order my men to throw thermite grenades into Moo-jin's position and burn him alive. Your choice, Miss Morrison. Save the man you love or let him die for pride. The line went dead. Don't even think about it, Sun-mi said immediately. It's a trap. He'll kill you both. He's going to kill Moo-jin anyway if I don't try. Elizabeth was already unbuckling her seatbelt, her hands moving with a strange calm that felt like someone else controlling her body. At least this way there's a chance. There's no chance. Ji-ho twisted in his seat. Kim Jae-sung is known for torturing hostages. He'll use you to break Moo-jin, make him watch you die slowly. Then I guess I better move fast. Elizabeth pulled off the bulletproof vest. It would just slow her down. She kept the small handgun Moo-jin had given her, tucking it into the back of her dress. Tell Moo-jin. Tell him I'm sorry. And that my grandmother was right. The people worth saving are always worth the risk. She was out of the vehicle before they could stop her, running toward the warehouse in trance across broken asphalt and scattered debris. Behind her, she heard Sun-mi and Ji-ho shouting, but they couldn't abandon their post, couldn't leave the vehicle unguarded. The warehouse loomed ahead, its front entrance a gaping mouth of darkness. Every survival instinct Elizabeth possessed screamed at her to turn back, to run, to choose life over this insane gesture. But she thought about Moo-jin, about the way he'd held her in his apartment, the vulnerability in his eyes when he'd talked about his mother, the desperate tenderness of his kiss. She thought about her grandmother's voice. Love recognizes no barriers. She thought about the man who'd spent his whole life being taught that caring was weakness, finally finding someone who saw past his armor to the broken, hoping thing underneath. And she walked through the entrance. The interior was chaos. Smoke, shadows, the acrid smell of gunpowder and burning material. Elizabeth's eyes struggled to adjust to the darkness broken only by emergency lighting and the occasional muzzle flash from deeper in the warehouse. Stop there. A man emerged from the shadows, gun trained on her center mass. 2 others flanked him. Arms up. Turn around slowly. Elizabeth complied, and they patted her down with rough efficiency, finding the handgun immediately. Well, well. The leader, young, cruel-faced, examined the weapon. Cute. Kim will appreciate the gesture. This way. They marched her deeper into the warehouse, through a maze of corridors and storage rooms. The sounds of fighting grew louder, then abruptly stopped. An eerie silence fell, broken only by her footsteps and her captor's boots. They emerged into a central space, some kind of former loading area, now cleared except for stacked crates that provided cover. Bodies littered the floor, and Elizabeth's heart seized until she realized none of them were Moo-jin. Kim Jae-sung stood in the center of the space, flanked by a dozen armed men. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe 40, handsome in a cold way, wearing an expensive suit somehow still immaculate despite the violence. Elizabeth Morrison. He smiled, and it was worse than any snarl. You actually came. How extraordinarily stupid. Where is he? Elizabeth's voice didn't shake, and she was proud of that. You said if I came, you'd let him surrender. I said I'd give him the option. Kim gestured, and one of his men pressed a button on a radio. Choi Moo-jin. Your girlfriend just walked into my custody. She's unarmed, unharmed, and standing about 20 feet from where I could put a bullet in her head. You have 30 seconds to come out with your hands up, or I start shooting parts of her that aren't immediately fatal. We can make this last hours. Static. Then Moo-jin's voice, rough with fury and fear. Let her go, Kim. This is between us. No, it became about her when you let yourself care. When you made her matter. Now come out, or I shoot her kneecap. 20 seconds. More static. Elizabeth heard voices in the background, arguing in Korean. Then, I'm coming out. Don't hurt her. Moo-jin, no. Elizabeth shouted, struggling against the hands holding her arms. It's a trap. He's going to kill us both anyway. Quiet. Kim backhanded her casually, and pain exploded across her face. The world spun, blood filling her mouth. A roar of pure rage echoed through the warehouse, and then Moo-jin was emerging from behind a container stack, hands raised, his face a mask of barely controlled fury. Blood streaked his temple, his suit was torn, and 5 men emerged with him, all that remained of his team. Han was there, limping but alive. Let her go, Moo-jin said, his voice deadly calm. You have me. That's what you wanted. What I wanted, Kim corrected, was your territory, your contacts, your empire. You were just the obstacle. He nodded to his men. Kill them all. Start with the girl. The moment stretched, crystallized, became eternal. Elizabeth saw the gun rising toward her, saw Moo-jin's eyes widen with horror, saw Han reaching for a weapon he didn't have time to draw. She thought, this is how I die. At least I tried. Then the world exploded into chaos. Moo-jin moved with inhuman speed, diving toward her even as his remaining men opened fire. Kim's forces returned fire, and the warehouse became a hellscape of muzzle flashes and ricocheting bullets. Elizabeth felt Moo-jin's body slam into hers, driving her down behind a crate. His arms wrapped around her, shielding her with his body even as bullets sparked off metal above their heads. I told you to stay in the car, he growled into her ear. I saved your life. You walked into an execution. So did you. She pulled back enough to look at him, and despite the chaos, despite the death happening around them, she smiled. Guess we're both idiots. Guess so. He kissed her, hard and fast, a seal on a promise that might not last the next 30 seconds. Then he was moving, pulling her deeper into cover as his men fought with desperate precision. The battle was brutal and close quarters. Elizabeth pressed herself against the crate, hands over her ears, trying to process the impossible violence happening around her. She'd never seen death before, real death, not movie death, and it was messy and loud and nothing like she'd imagined. Han fell, clutching his side. Another of Moo-jin's men went down, silent and final. They were losing. Kim's voice cut through the chaos. "It's over, Choi. Surrender and I'll make it quick." Moo-jin's response was another burst of gunfire, but Elizabeth heard the click that followed, empty magazine. Their eyes met, and in that moment, Elizabeth saw him calculating odds, accepting the inevitable. He was going to do something stupid and heroic and fatal. "No," she whispered. "I love you," he said simply, as if it explained everything. Maybe it did. He stood, drawing Kim's fire, giving his last few men a chance to strike back. And Elizabeth, without thinking, without planning, driven by pure instinct and the memory of her grandmother's voice saying that sometimes love meant jumping in front of the bullet, threw herself in front of him. The impact was like being hit by a truck. She heard Moo-jin scream her name. Then there was just pain and darkness, and the feeling of falling into a void where even love couldn't follow. Before I reveal the truth, subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. This twist changes everything. Pain was the first thing Elizabeth registered. Searing, white-hot agony that radiated from her side and seemed to consume every nerve ending. The second thing was Moo-jin's voice, ragged and desperate, screaming her name like a prayer to a god who'd stopped listening. She opened her eyes to chaos. Moo-jin knelt over her, one hand pressed against her side where warmth spread through her white blouse. No, not white anymore, crimson now, blooming like some terrible flower. His face was contorted with an anguish so raw it hurt to look at, and his other hand cradled her head with a gentleness that seemed impossible given the violence erupting around them. "Elizabeth, no, no, no," his voice broke on her name. "Why did you can't." She tried to speak, but blood filled her mouth. The warehouse ceiling spun above her, flickering emergency lights creating a strobe effect that made everything feel unreal, dreamlike. Then something changed in Moo-jin's expression. The anguish didn't disappear, but it was joined by something else, something primal and terrifying. His eyes, when they lifted from her face to scan the warehouse, held a fury so potent it seemed to darken the air around him. "Han," he said, his voice barely human. "Get her out. Now. Boss. Now." The roar shook the walls. Han, bleeding but functional, crawled over and gathered Elizabeth into his arms. She tried to protest, tried to tell Moo-jin not to do whatever he was planning, but her voice wouldn't work, would only produce a weak gurgle. Moo-jin stood, and Elizabeth saw him transform. Whatever control he'd maintained, whatever humanity he'd clung to, shattered completely. He picked up a fallen rifle, checked the magazine with practiced efficiency, and turned toward Kim's position with the kind of focus that made apex predators look tame. "You shot her," he said, each word precisely enunciated, cold as death. "You shot the only good thing in my entire miserable existence. She jumped in front of you." Kim called back from behind his cover. Her choice, her stupidity, her sacrifice. Moo-jin started walking forward, firing with mechanical precision. One of Kim's men fell. Then another. Which means you just made the last mistake of your short, pointless life. Elizabeth watched through dimming vision as Moo-jin became something out of nightmare. He moved through the warehouse like vengeance incarnate, his remaining men rallying behind him with renewed fury. Every movement was efficient, brutal, final. He wasn't just fighting anymore. He was punishing, was making Kim's forces pay in blood for the blood they'd spilled. Han carried her toward an exit, and Elizabeth's last sight of Moo-jin was him diving over a crate, firing mid-air, taking down 3 men before he even landed. Then they were outside, in the cold night air that felt like ice on her skin. Sunmi was there with the SUV, her face pale with horror when she saw Elizabeth's wound. "Hospital," Han gasped, laying Elizabeth across the back seat. "Nearest trauma center now." The vehicle lurched forward, and pain spiked through Elizabeth so sharply she couldn't even scream. Sunmi was in the back with her, pressing something against the wound, a jacket, maybe her own shirt, murmuring words Elizabeth couldn't understand through the roaring in her ears. "Stay with me," Sunmi kept saying. "Stay awake, Elizabeth. Moo-jin will kill us all if we lose you. Stay awake." Elizabeth tried. She really did. But the darkness was so inviting, so much easier than the pain, and her grandmother's face kept appearing in her mind. Ruth Morrison, smiling that gentle smile, saying "It's okay, baby girl. You can rest now. You did good. Asterisk." "No," Elizabeth whispered. "Not yet. He needs me." "That's right." Sunmi's face swam into focus, fierce and determined. "He needs you. So you stay. You fight. You hear me. Fight." The hospital emerged from the darkness like a beacon, St. Luke's Medical Center, its emergency entrance blazing with light. The SUV screeched to a halt, and then there were hands everywhere, voices shouting medical terminology, a gurney appearing beneath her. Gunshot wound right side, through and through by the looks of it. BP dropping, we need to move. Get her to trauma 2, call surgery. Elizabeth caught Sunmi's wrist as they wheeled her away. Tell him, she managed. Tell Moo-jin I'm sorry. Tell him there's still good in him. Tell him. Tell him yourself, Sunmi said fiercely. You're not dying today, Elizabeth Morrison. I won't allow it. Then the ceiling tiles were flying past overhead, fluorescent lights burning into her retinas, and someone was putting a mask over her face, and a voice was saying, count backward from 10. And Elizabeth thought I never got to tell him I love him back before the darkness finally claimed her completely. Meanwhile, at the warehouse asterisk, Moo-jin had become death itself. Kim's forces, 30 strong when the night began, were down to maybe 15, and those remaining were starting to panic. They'd expected a siege, a negotiation, maybe a quick execution. They hadn't expected the monster that Choi Moo-jin became when someone touched what was his. He reloaded behind a container, his hands moving automatically while his mind replayed Elizabeth's body crumpling, the blood spreading across her white blouse, her eyes going wide with shock and pain. The image was seared into his brain, would be there forever, a brand marking the moment he learned what it really meant to lose something. She took a bullet for me. The thought was incomprehensible. In Moo-jin's world, people ran from bullets, betrayed you to save themselves, chose survival over sacrifice every single time. His father had taught him that lesson with brutal efficiency. Trust no one, care for nothing, because attachment was just another word for weakness. But Elizabeth had looked at him with all his blood and darkness and irredeemable violence, and decided he was worth dying for. The rage that thought produced was biblical. Kim. Moo-jin's voice echoed through the warehouse. It's over. Your men are running. Come out and face me or die hiding like a coward. Silence. Then movement. Kim's remaining forces were indeed retreating, scrambling for exits, abandoning their boss. Smart. They'd realized this wasn't business anymore. This was personal, and personal meant everyone died. Moo-jin's remaining men, just 3 now, including the wounded, formed up behind him. They looked like they'd been through hell, because they had been. But they also looked grimly determined. Boss, one of them said quietly. Your phone's been buzzing. Might be news about the girl. Moo-jin pulled out his phone with shaking hands, saw 17 missed calls from Sunmi, and felt his heart stop. If Elizabeth was dead, if that bullet had. He called back. Sunmi answered on the first ring. She's alive, she said immediately, knowing what he needed to hear. In surgery. The doctors say it missed major organs, but she's lost a lot of blood. It's going to be close, Moo-jin. He sagged against the container, relief so profound it made him dizzy, warring with terror that still clawed at his chest. Where are you? St. Luke's. Trauma wing. We're. Gunfire erupted on her end. Shit. They're here. Kim's men are at the hospital. The phone went dead. Moo-jin's eyes went completely cold. He turned to his men. Kim sent a team to the hospital. To finish what they started. Then what are we waiting for? Han, holding his wounded side, picked up a fresh weapon. Let's end this. They moved through the warehouse methodically, hunting Kim with relentless precision. They found him in a back office, trying to escape through a window like a rat abandoning a sinking ship. Moo-jin grabbed him by the collar and slammed him against the wall hard enough to crack plaster. You sent men to a hospital to kill an innocent woman in a trauma ward. She's not innocent. Kim spat blood. She's your weakness. And in our world, weakness gets exploited. No. Moo-jin's hand wrapped around Kim's throat. In your world, maybe. But I'm done with that world. Done with the old rules. Done with men like you who think honor and mercy are just other words for stupid. So what, you're going soft? Becoming some kind of hero? Kim's laugh was choked, bitter. You'll be dead within a year. Someone else will come after you after her, and next time you won't be fast enough. Maybe. Moo-jin's grip tightened. But at least I'll have tried to be better. At least I'll have proven that my father was wrong. That being human isn't weakness. That caring isn't fatal. That someone like me can deserve someone like her. He thought about Elizabeth's words in his apartment. Everyone has something good in them, even when they work really hard to hide it. He thought about his mother, about how she believed in art and beauty and redemption right up until his father's world consumed her. He thought about the choice in front of him, to be what his father had made him or to become something different. Someone who Elizabeth Morrison might actually survive loving. I should kill you, Moo-jin said quietly. Every rule of my world says I should end you right now, make an example, prove that crossing me costs everything. But you won't. Kim's smile was victorious despite the hand around his throat. Because she's made you weak. No. Moo-jin released him, let him drop to the floor gasping. She's made me strong enough to choose mercy. Strong enough to break the cycle. Strong enough to be better than what I was raised to be. He pulled out his phone, called someone. I'm sending you coordinates. Kim Jae-sung is here, alive. Take him into custody. He's finished in this city. He hung up, looked down at Kim. You're done. Your organization is scattered. Your reputation is destroyed. You attacked me and lost, which means every ambitious lieutenant you have will be coming for your position. You'll spend whatever time you have left looking over your shoulder, waiting for the knife. He started walking toward the exit. That's a worse punishment than death. Living with your failure. Living knowing that mercy defeated you. This isn't over. Kim shouted after him. She's still in danger. There are others like me, others who'll see her as a target. Then I'll deal with them too. Moo-jin paused in the doorway. And every one of them will learn the same lesson you did tonight. That touching what's mine costs everything. That I'll burn this entire underworld to the ground before I let anyone hurt her again. He walked out into the pre-dawn darkness, leaving Kim alive but broken, leaving the old way behind, running toward a hospital where the woman who'd taken a bullet for him fought for her life. His phone rang. Sun me again. The men at the hospital, she said breathlessly. They're in the parking garage. 4 of them. We're pinned in the lobby. I'm 10 minutes out. Hold them off. Moo-jin, they have explosives. They're going to bring down the trauma wing if they can't get to her. His blood turned to ice. Then I better get there in 8 minutes. He ran for the remaining SUV, his men piling in behind him, and as they tore out of the port of Long Beach toward downtown Los Angeles, Moo-jin made a silent promise to Elizabeth, to his mother's memory, to whatever good might still exist in his damaged soul. Asterisk, I'm coming. Hold on. Just hold on. I'm not losing you. Not when I just found what it means to be human again. Asterisk. The SUV speedometer climbed past 90, past 100, tearing through red lights and empty streets, racing the sunrise and death itself toward the woman who'd seen good in a monster and decided he was worth saving. Behind them, the warehouse burned, not from explosives, but from Han's final act before leaving, setting fire to Kim's stockpiles, destroying evidence and empire both. The old world was burning. And from its ashes, maybe, just maybe, something better could rise. Don't blink. Subscribe, comment your country. Then watch what happens next. You're not ready. St. Luke's Medical Center sat in the heart of downtown Los Angeles, a modern fortress of glass and steel that served the city's trauma cases 24 hours a day. At 4:30 in the morning, its emergency wing was relatively quiet. The drunk driving accidents had tapered off, the late-night violence had mostly been processed, and the day shift hadn't yet arrived, which made it the perfect time for an attack. Sun-mi crouched behind a concrete pillar in the main lobby, her borrowed pistol trained on the parking garage entrance. Ji-ho was somewhere to her left, covering another angle. 2 hospital security guards, brave but badly outgunned, had taken positions near the elevators. "This is insane," one of them whispered. "We should evacuate." "No time," Sun-mi cut him off. "They'll blow the trauma wing the moment they see us moving patients. We hold them here until Moo-jin arrives." "And if he doesn't?" Sun-mi's smile was grim. "Then we die protecting her, and his vengeance burns this city to the ground. Either way, those men out there lose." A shadow moved in the parking garage entrance. Sun-mi fired twice, heard a curse in Korean, knew she'd winged one of them at least. "You can't win," a voice called out. "We have C4. We'll bring down this whole building. Then you'll die in the rubble with us." Sun-mi shouted back. "Kim is already finished. Moo-jin took apart your entire operation. Surrender now and maybe you live to see morning." Laughter. Kim's orders were clear. The girl dies, even if we die making it happen. She made Choi Moo-jin weak, made him human. Can't have that. Bad for business. Ji-ho caught Sun-mi's eye from across the lobby, his expression saying what they both knew. These men were fanatics, true believers in the old way. They couldn't be reasoned with, couldn't be bought off. They would complete their mission or die trying, which meant Sun-mi and her small force would have to kill them first. Upstairs, in the trauma wing, Elizabeth drifted in and out of consciousness on the operating table. The surgeon, Dr. Patricia Chen, 20 years of experience in gunshot trauma, worked with focused intensity, repairing damaged tissue, stopping bleeding, fighting to save a life she knew nothing about except that it had brought armed men to her hospital. "BP stabilizing," a nurse reported. "She's a fighter." "She'll need to be," Dr. Chen muttered, examining the bullet's path. "Through and through, missed the kidney by inches, nicked the intestine. She's incredibly lucky." "Lucky would be not getting shot," another nurse observed. "Lucky is relative." Dr. Chen continued suturing. "Someone tell security we need this wing locked down. I don't care what's happening downstairs. No one gets up here until I'm done." But even as she spoke, the elevator at the end of the hallway chimed softly, and 4 men emerged. Not hospital staff, not visitors. They wore dark clothes and carried duffel bags that bulged with ominous shapes. The charge nurse at the station looked up, smiled professionally. "I'm sorry, visiting hours don't start until..." The lead man shot her. Not fatally, through the shoulder, dropping her behind the desk with a scream that echoed down the hallway. The other nurses scattered, scrambling for cover, hitting panic buttons that would summon security who were already pinned down in the lobby. "Trauma 2, the lead man said calmly, consulting a phone. "That's where the girl is. Set charges on Trauma 1 and 3. When she comes out, we blow all 3 rooms. No survivors." They moved with military efficiency, splitting up, pulling blocks of C4 from their bags and attaching them to doorframes with practiced ease. Inside Trauma 2, Dr. Chen heard the gunshot and swore. "Lock the doors. Now." A nurse hit the emergency lockdown, and heavy metal shutters began descending over the trauma room's entrance. They were designed for active shooter situations, for protecting vulnerable patients during crises. They wouldn't stop C4. "How much longer?" the nurse asked, voice shaking. Dr. Chen looked at Elizabeth's exposed wound, at the careful work still needed. 20 minutes. Minimum. "We don't have 20 minutes. Then I work faster." Dr. Chen's hands never stopped moving. "And we pray someone stops those men before they blow us all to hell." Moo-jin's SUV screamed into the hospital parking garage at 4:47 a.m., tires squealing, engine roaring. He was out before it fully stopped. Han and the others right behind him, weapons ready. The parking garage was a maze of concrete pillars and shadows. Moo-jin's instincts, honed by decades of violence, told him exactly where the ambush would come from. He dove left just as gunfire erupted, bullets sparking off concrete where he'd been standing. His men returned fire, and the garage became an echo chamber of violence. 2 on the right. Han shouted. 1 behind the blue sedan. Moo-jin moved like water, flowing from cover to cover, closing distance with ruthless efficiency. He wasn't trying to be careful anymore, wasn't trying to minimize damage. These men had come to a hospital, a place of healing, to murder an innocent woman. They deserved no mercy. He came around a pillar and found himself face to face with one of Kim's men. The man swung his rifle up, but Moo-jin was faster, was always faster, disarming him with brutal efficiency and using the rifle to cave in the man's skull with a sickening crack. 1 down. Han took another with a perfect headshot. 2 down. The remaining 2 retreated toward the lobby entrance, firing wildly, desperation making them sloppy. Moo-jin pursued relentlessly, and when one of them turned to make a stand, Moo-jin put 3 rounds center mass without breaking stride. 3 down. The last one made it through the lobby entrance, shouting a warning to someone inside. Moo-jin followed and found himself in a standoff. Sunmi and Ji-ho on one side, for more of Kim's men on the other, and between them, the last member of the parking garage team holding a detonator. 1 more step and I blow the trauma wing, the man screamed. My brothers upstairs already set the charges. This button ends everything. Moo-jin froze. His eyes found Sunmi's, saw the grim acknowledgement there. It was true. They'd gotten men upstairs. Elizabeth was in immediate danger. How much C4? Moo-jin asked, his voice eerily calm. Enough to collapse 3 rooms. Your girl, all the doctors, nurses. Everyone dies. Moo-jin's mind raced, calculating angles, odds, possibilities. The man's finger was already on the detonator button. Any shot would trigger a reflexive squeeze. No way to take him alive. No way to stop the signal if he pressed it. Unless. You want me, Moo-jin said, setting down his rifle. That's what this is really about. Kim's orders were probably to kill the girl, but if you can kill me too, that's a bonus. That's the kind of thing that makes you a legend. Boss no, Han started. Shut up. Moo-jin raised his hands, stepping forward. Here's a better deal. I surrender. You take me hostage. Use me as leverage to walk out of here alive. Let the girl live, and you get the biggest prize in the Los Angeles underworld. Choi Moo-jin neutralized. The man's eyes gleamed with desperate hope. How do I know you won't have your people shoot us the moment we leave? Because I'm going to order them to stand down right now. Moo-jin looked at Sunmi, at Han, at Ji-ho. If I die here, you 3 are in charge. Split the organization 3 ways. Honor my mother's memory. And make sure Elizabeth Morrison never wants for anything. Moo-jin. Sunmi's voice broke. That's an order. His eyes held hers, communicating something deeper than words. Then he turned back to Kim's men. So what do you say? A guaranteed escape and the most valuable hostage you could ask for, or a mutual suicide that accomplishes nothing? The men exchanged glances, weighing options, and Moo-jin could see the moment they decided to take the deal. The leader nodded slowly. No tricks. You come here, hands where we can see them, and we walk out together. Moo-jin moved forward, each step measured and careful. His mind was utterly calm, utterly focused. Everything in his life had led to this moment. Every lesson from his father about sacrifice and weakness, every word from Elizabeth about goodness and redemption, every choice he'd made that had brought him to this point. He'd spent his whole life being told that caring was fatal, that attachment would get him killed. Maybe his father had been right. But as Moo-jin walked toward Kim's men, hands raised, offering himself in exchange for Elizabeth's life, he realized something profound. His father had taught him how to survive, but Elizabeth had taught him what was worth dying for. And that made all the difference. He was 3 steps away when the elevator chimed. Every head turned instinctively toward the sound, and in that split second of distraction, Moo-jin moved. He'd been a weapon his entire life. trained from childhood in every form of violence imaginable. That training took over now, operating on pure instinct. He closed the distance to the man with the detonator in a blur of motion, his hand chopping down on the wrist with bone-breaking force. The detonator clattered to the floor. Then Moo-jin was in among them, and it was beautiful and terrible in equal measure. He moved like a dance of death, every strike precisely calculated to disable or kill. Sun-mi and Han opened fire the moment they had clear shots, and within seconds it was over. Kim's men lay scattered across the lobby floor, dead or dying. Moo-jin picked up the detonator with shaking hands, looking at the single red button that could have ended everything. "The men upstairs," he gasped. "The charges." "Already handled," said a new voice. Moo-jin spun to find Director Park emerging from the elevator, flanked by a SWAT team in full tactical gear. She held up a phone showing video footage, armed men being taken down in the trauma wing hallway, see 4 blocks being carefully dismantled. "I called in backup the moment Sun-mi told me about the hospital threat," Park said calmly. "Did you really think I'd let them blow up one of our best money laundering operations? This hospital's board of directors is half funded by your organization." Despite everything, Moo-jin laughed, a half-hysterical sound of relief and exhaustion. "Of course it is. The charges are disarmed. The trauma wing is secure. And your girl," Park checked her phone again, "just came out of surgery. Dr. Chen says she'll make a full recovery." Moo-jin's legs gave out. He dropped to his knees right there in the lobby, surrounded by bodies and blood and the wreckage of the old world, and felt something break open in his chest. Not pain, but its opposite. Relief so profound it felt like resurrection. "She's alive," he whispered. "She's alive," Park confirmed. "Now get up, Choi Moo-jin. You look ridiculous on your knees." Sun-mi and Han helped him up, both grinning despite their injuries and exhaustion. Around them, police sirens were finally arriving. Park's people, paid to look the other way long enough for the real violence to be handled privately. "Can I see her?" Moo-jin asked. "She's in recovery. Sedated. Won't wake up for hours." Park paused. "But yes. Room 412. And Moo-jin. When she wakes up, you better have figured out what you're going to say. That woman took a bullet for you. That deserves more than your usual emotional constipation." He took the stairs 2 at a time, too impatient to wait for elevators, his heart hammering with something that wasn't fear anymore but anticipation. The 4th floor was quiet, dimly lit for the pre-dawn hours, nurses moving with soft efficiency. Room 412's door was cracked open. Moo-jin entered as silently as he knew how. Elizabeth lay in the hospital bed, small and fragile against white sheets, and 4 in her arm and monitors beeping softly. Her face was peaceful in sleep, that elegant bone structure relaxed. Her natural hair spread across the pillow like a dark halo. She was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. Moo-jin pulled a chair to her bedside and took her hand carefully, mindful of the 4. Her fingers were warm, her pulse steady beneath his thumb, and each beat was a miracle he'd almost lost. "I'm here," he whispered. "I'm here, and you're safe, and I'm never letting you out of my sight again." Outside the window, the sun was starting to rise over Los Angeles, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. A new day. A new beginning. Moo-jin sat with Elizabeth's hand in his and watched her breathe, and for the first time in his violent, bloody life, felt something like peace. Before I show you the craziest part, hit that subscribe button and tell me where you're watching from. This is about to get wild. Elizabeth woke to the smell of antiseptic and the soft beeping of medical equipment. Her side throbbed with a dull, persistent ache that reminded her immediately of what had happened. The warehouse, the bullet, Moo-jin's face contorted with anguish as she fell. She opened her eyes to find him asleep in a chair beside her bed, still wearing his blood-stained, torn suit, his hand wrapped around hers. Even in sleep, he looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, his sharp features softened by vulnerability she'd rarely seen when he was awake. "You look terrible," she whispered. His eyes snapped open immediately, and the transformation was instantaneous, from sleeping to fully alert in a heartbeat. Then he registered that she was awake, that she was talking, and something cracked in his carefully controlled expression. Elizabeth. Her name came out rough, broken. How do you feel? Like I got shot. She managed a weak smile. But alive. That's something. That's everything. He stood, leaning over her, his free hand cupping her face with a gentleness that belied the violence still evident on his clothes. You died. For 2 minutes on the operating table, your heart stopped. Dr. Chen brought you back, but his voice broke. I thought I'd lost you. Takes more than a bullet to get rid of me. Elizabeth turned her face into his palm, pressing a kiss there. My grandmother always said I was too stubborn to die young. Your grandmother was a very wise woman. Moo-jin's thumb traced her cheekbone. You shouldn't have jumped in front of me. You shouldn't have been there at all. You promised to stay in the car. And you promised to come back. Elizabeth met his eyes directly. We both broke our promises. I'd say that makes us even. Even. He laughed, but it sounded more like a sob. Elizabeth, you took a bullet meant for me. There's no even in that equation. There's just you being impossibly brave and me being impossibly grateful and terrified and, he stopped, struggling for words. And what? And in love with you. The words came out quiet but certain, like a confession he'd been holding back for too long. Completely, irrevocably in love with you. Which is insane because we've known each other for 3 months, and most of that time I was trying to convince myself that caring about you was a mistake. Elizabeth's heart monitor beeped faster. Was it a mistake? The best mistake I've ever made. Moo-jin pressed his forehead to hers carefully, mindful of her injuries. You saw something in me that I'd stopped believing existed. You looked at all my darkness and decided there was still light worth saving. And then you proved it by stepping in front of a bullet. I'd do it again, Elizabeth said simply. Don't. His voice turned fierce. Don't ever do that again. I can survive a lot of things, Elizabeth, but losing you isn't one of them. Then I guess you better keep me safe. She smiled, then winced as the movement pulled at her stitches. What happened? After the shooting. Moo-jin settled back in his chair, still holding her hand like a lifeline. Kim is finished. His organization is scattered. The men he sent to the hospital are dead or in custody. The kind of custody that doesn't involve lawyers or trials, if you understand my meaning. I'm not sure I want to. Probably wise. His smile was grim. But the immediate threat is over. You're safe. I made sure of it. At what cost? The question hung in the air between them. Moo-jin looked away, out the window where morning sunlight streamed through, and Elizabeth saw the weight of it settling on his shoulders. All the violence, all the death, all the choices he'd made to protect her. The cost doesn't matter, he said finally. Not compared to keeping you alive. It matters to me. Elizabeth squeezed his hand. Moo-jin, I don't want you to become more of what you're trying to escape just to protect me. That's not saving you. That's destroying the part of you I fell in love with. And what part is that? The part that buys vases to remember his mother. The part that owns buildings to protect restaurants. The part that knows about art and drinks terrible coffee and looks at me like I'm something precious. She paused. The part that's still capable of being the man his mother hoped he'd become. Moo-jin was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. My mother used to say that every person gets to choose who they become, no matter what they're born into. I never believed her. Thought my father had made that choice for me before I was even old enough to understand what choice meant. And now I think maybe she was right. He looked back at her, and his eyes held something fragile and hoping. You make me want to choose differently. To be better. To build something that honors her memory instead of desecrating it. So do it. Elizabeth's voice was steady despite her exhaustion. Walk away from the violence. Use everything you have, the money, the connections, the power, to build something good instead of maintaining something destructive. It's not that simple. There are obligations, alliances, people who depend on. Then make it simple. She cut him off gently. My grandmother had another saying, The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. You're not evil, Moo-jin. You've done evil things, yes, but that's not the same as being irredeemable. You can choose differently. And if choosing differently gets you killed? Gets the people I care about killed. His grip on her hand tightened. The moment I show weakness, every ambitious lieutenant and rival boss will see an opportunity. You became a target because of me. That won't change just because I decide to be noble. Then we deal with it together. Elizabeth pulled him closer with her free hand, ignoring the protest from her injuries. You don't have to do this alone. That's what love means, facing the impossible together instead of bearing it separately. A knock at the door interrupted them. Dr. Chen entered, flanked by 2 nurses, her expression professionally neutral. Miss Morrison, you're awake. Good. How's the pain? Manageable. Elizabeth lied. Dr. Chen's look suggested she didn't believe that for a second. We'll adjust your medication. You're very lucky, Miss Morrison. The bullet missed major organs by millimeters. Another inch to the left and we'd be having a very different conversation. I'm aware. I'm also aware, Dr. Chen continued, her gaze shifting to Moo-jin, that your companion here has been refusing to leave for the past 18 hours. He's wounded, exhausted, and desperately needs medical attention himself. I'm fine, Moo-jin said flatly. You have a concussion, 3 cracked ribs, and a gash on your temple that needs stitches, Dr. Chen countered. You're not fine. You're just highly motivated to ignore medical reality. Elizabeth looked at Moo-jin with new alarm, noticing for the first time the way he held himself carefully, the dried blood at his hairline she'd mistaken for shadow. You're hurt. It's nothing. It's not nothing. Let them treat you. I'm not leaving you. I'm not asking you to leave. Elizabeth's voice carried the same steel her grandmother had used when brooking no argument from recalcitrant students. I'm asking you to take care of yourself so that when I'm discharged, you're actually capable of the grand romantic gestures I'm definitely expecting. Despite everything, Moo-jin laughed. Grand romantic gestures? Absolutely. You confessed your love while I'm high on painkillers in a hospital bed. That barely counts. You owe me at least one proper romantic moment when I'm conscious enough to appreciate it. Dr. Chen cleared her throat. If you're both finished being adorable, I need to examine my patient and bully your companion into the next room for treatment. Moo-jin stood reluctantly, but before the doctor could hustle him away, he leaned down and kissed Elizabeth's forehead with infinite tenderness. I'll be right next door. If you need anything, I'll scream dramatically and you'll come running. I know. Elizabeth smiled. Go. Let them fix you. He left with obvious reluctance, and Dr. Chen began her examination with practiced efficiency. As she checked vitals and inspected the surgical site, she spoke quietly. That man would burn the world for you. You know that, right? I'm starting to understand that, yes. Just make sure the world he burns is worth the ashes. Dr. Chen's eyes were knowing, understanding far more than she probably should. St. Luke's has seen a lot of violence over the years. Seen a lot of men like him walk through those doors. Most of them don't change. Most of them can't. But every once in a while. She trailed off, finishing her examination. Every once in a while, the right person shows them that there's something worth changing for. You think I'm the right person? I think you took a bullet for him and he stopped a hospital siege for you. That's either the most beautiful love story I've ever witnessed or the most tragic waiting to happen. Dr. Chen finished updating Elizabeth's chart. For your sake, I hope it's the former. 3 days passed in a haze of medication, visits from Moo-jin's people checking on her welfare, and increasingly frequent moments of clarity as her body began to heal. Moo-jin was a constant presence, refusing to leave despite Elizabeth's insistence that he had an empire to run. Han is handling things, he'd say, pulling his chair closer to her bed. Right now, you're more important. On the 4th day, Elizabeth was finally cleared to leave. Moo-jin arrived with clean clothes. Somehow he'd gotten her sizes exactly right, and helped her dress with careful gentleness, his hands steady despite the emotion in his eyes. Where are we going? Elizabeth asked as he helped her into a wheelchair hospital policy required. Somewhere safe. Somewhere beautiful. His smile was mysterious. Somewhere that matters. The somewhere turned out to be his mother's house, a modest bungalow in Silver Lake that he'd maintained but never lived in since her death. It sat on a quiet street lined with jacaranda trees, their purple blooms creating a canopy overhead. I haven't been inside in 5 years, Moo-jin admitted, helping Elizabeth up the front steps. Couldn't face it. Couldn't face her things, her memories, the ghost of who I was supposed to become. And now I think it's time. He unlocked the door, and they stepped inside together. The house was frozen in time, furniture covered in white sheets, photographs on the walls showing a younger Moo-jin with his mother, her artwork displayed with obvious pride. There was love in every corner, preserved like amber, waiting for someone brave enough to remember. Moo-jin led Elizabeth to the living room, settling her carefully on a newly uncovered couch. Then he knelt in front of her, taking both her hands in his, and she saw her reflection in his eyes. Saw herself as he saw her, luminous and precious and utterly necessary. I'm done, he said quietly. With the old way. With the violence and the territory wars and the endless cycle of retribution. I'm going to restructure everything. Make it legitimate, make it clean. It'll take time, years maybe, and there'll be resistance, but I'm done being what my father made me. What changed your mind? You died. His voice cracked on the words. For 2 minutes, you were gone, and in those 2 minutes I understood something my father spent his whole life trying to beat out of me. That some things are worth more than survival. That being truly alive means having something worth dying for. Someone worth living for. Elizabeth's eyes burned with tears. Moo-jin. I'm not done. He squeezed her hands. I know I'm not some reformed hero. I know I have blood on my hands that will never wash clean. I know that choosing a different path doesn't erase where I've been. But you make me want to try anyway. You make me believe that my mother's dream, of a son who creates beauty instead of destroying it, might still be possible. It is possible, Elizabeth whispered. It's always been possible. You just needed to believe it yourself. Then help me believe it. His eyes held hers, vulnerable and fierce in equal measure. Stay with me. Not because you have to, not because you're caught up in my world, but because you choose to. Help me become someone worthy of the sacrifice you made. You already are worthy. Elizabeth cupped his face, feeling the tension there, the hope barely daring to surface. But I'll stay anyway. I'll stay and fight with you and love you and remind you every single day that there's good in you worth saving. Moo-jin's kiss was different this time, not desperate or afraid, but full of promise. Full of future instead of just survival. When they broke apart, he pressed something into her hand. A key. To this house, he said. It's yours now. Ours. A place to remember where we're going by honoring where I came from. Elizabeth closed her fingers around the key, feeling its weight, its significance. Your mother would be proud of you. I hope so. Moo-jin stood, helping her up, and together they walked to the window overlooking the garden his mother had tended. Now overgrown but still beautiful in its wildness. I hope she's watching. Hope she knows that her son finally found his way back to being human. They stood there as the afternoon light slanted through the jacaranda trees, painting everything purple and gold. Two people from completely different worlds who'd found something impossible in each other. Not just love, but redemption. Not just survival, but the courage to choose life over the comfortable numbness of merely existing. Outside, Los Angeles hummed with its usual chaos. Millions of people living millions of lives, most never knowing how close they'd come to another gang war, another bloodbath, another tragedy. But in that small house in Silver Lake, Choi Moo-jin and Elizabeth Morrison stood together at the window, and in the space between their joined hands was a promise that love could be stronger than fear, that change was always possible, and that sometimes the bravest thing anyone could do was choose to be better than what the world expected. 3 months later, the newspapers would report a massive restructuring in Los Angeles's Korean business community. Illegal operations shut down, territory surrendered, a notorious crime boss apparently going legitimate. Analysts would speculate about reasons, about federal pressure or rival threats or simple business sense. None of them would guess the real reason. A kind black American woman who dealt in antiques and believed in seeing the good in people, even when those people didn't believe in themselves. But that story, the story of what happened next, of building something new from the ashes of the old, of loving someone damaged and being loved by them in return, that was still being written. And in room 412 of St. Luke's Medical Center, where Elizabeth had fought for her life, Dr. Chen would sometimes pause during her rounds and remember the couple who'd taught her that miracles came in unexpected packages. Sometimes in the form of a bullet that missed by inches, sometimes in the form of love that refused to give up. She'd think about the question she posed to her students. What would you risk everything for? And she'd smile, knowing that some people, rare, beautiful people, already knew the answer. Moo-jin pulled Elizabeth closer as the sun set over Los Angeles, painting the sky in shades of fire and promise. Her wound was healing, his ribs were mending, and somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed. But they weren't coming for them anymore. What are you thinking? Elizabeth asked softly. That I spent my whole life being told that caring was weakness, Moo-jin said, his lips brushing her hair. And it took a woman brave enough to take a bullet to teach me that it's actually the only real strength that matters. Elizabeth tilted her head up to look at him, and in her eyes he saw his future. Not blood-stained and violent, but full of ordinary moments that felt like miracles. Coffee on Thursday mornings. Gallery openings without assassinations. A life built on something other than fear. I love you, she said simply. I love you too, he replied, and meant it with every broken, healing piece of his damaged heart. The sun dipped below the horizon, and in the growing darkness, they stood together. Two people who'd chosen each other against all logic, all reason, all the warnings that screamed they were impossible. But sometimes impossible was just another word for worth fighting for. And this fragile, fierce, beautiful thing between them, was worth everything. But what happens next? Can Moo-jin truly leave his violent past behind, or will it come back to haunt them both? Will Elizabeth's faith in redemption be enough to save them from the enemies still lurking in the shadows? And when the next threat emerges, because in Moo-jin's world, there's always a next threat, will their love be bulletproof enough to survive? If this story moved you, if you found yourself holding your breath as Elizabeth took that bullet, if you believe in the power of love to transform even the most broken souls, then like this video and subscribe to our channel. We bring you emotionally charged stories of love, redemption, and the courage to believe in second chances. Drop a comment below telling us, would you take a bullet for someone you love? What would you risk everything for? Hit that notification bell because next week, we're diving into another tale of impossible love and the choices that define us. You won't want to miss it. Until then, remember, sometimes the bravest thing we can do is see the good in others, even when they've stopped seeing it in themselves.